Welcome to Can We Talk? Conversations That Matter, sponsored by the Human Resource Department, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Good morning. Welcome to Can We Talk? Conversations That Matter, sponsored by the Human Resource Department, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. My name is Robert Stanko, and I would like to thank you for joining us today. When we think about the history of voting in America, certain dates come to mind. August 18th, 1920, ratification of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. August 6th, 1965, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law securing the right to vote for racial minorities throughout the country, especially in the South. July 1st, 1971, ratification of the 26th Amendment changing the minimum voting age from 21 to 18. While these are just dates, the sacrifices of such people as Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King Jr., and John Lewis provided all people voting rights that should not be taken for granted. Now, Treshawn Lumpkin will introduce our panel of voting advocates that will lead this meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Good morning. Joining us on our panel today, we have Essence Doucette, Brad Cromis, and Mike West. Essence is an IT professional with over 20 years of experience working with the Department of Defense. Today, Essence joins us in her capacity as second vice president for the Cleveland section of the National Council of Negro Women, where she chairs the membership, social justice, and public relations committees. Under her leadership, the Social Justice Committee works to raise awareness and protect voter rights. Brad is our current Cuyahoga County Treasurer. Starting in November 2023, Brad has brought a wealth of experience and a deep commitment to public service to the role that he is in currently. Before joining our Cuyahoga County team, Brad served as the Portage County Treasurer and the Deputy Director for the Portage County Board of Elections. Mike has dedicated 16 years to the Cuyahoga Board of Elections, where he serves as the manager of the Community Outreach Department. In this role, he is passionate about promoting voter education and ensuring that the community members are well informed about the electoral process and their voting rights. His team develops initiatives and resources aimed at increasing awareness and civic engagement. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Now, let's go ahead and start our conversation with our committee co-chairs, Kim Coleman and Laura Cannon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's just jump right in here. Our first issue. Cuyahoga County has well over 1.2 million residents, so these statistics are concerning. In the November 3rd, 2020 general election, Cuyahoga County had 71.04% registered voter turnout, but in the November 2022 general election, the county only had 47.28% registered voter turnout. Those statistics show that a majority of people only vote in presidential election years. How do we stress the importance of voting every year and voting the entire ballot? I would like to open this up to all. Essence, would you like to start?
I can. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Local elections are extremely important. They impact our day-to-day lives. They have a direct impact on our day-to-day lives. Local elections determine who your county prosecutor is going to be, who your sheriff is going to be, who your judges are going to be. They also determine who your school board members are going to be. And all of these officials have the capacity to ascend to state and federal positions. Don't you want to say and who may potentially represent you at a state and federal level at some point? It's extremely important to vote in all elections, local, state, and special elections, because you are essentially interviewing and hiring candidates who are going to work for you and represent you. Getting involved in politics just at the presidential elections is okay, but the fact of the matter is the local elections are the elections that impact your day-to-day lives, and those are the ones that we need to pay particular attention to.
Thanks, Essence. I think that those were excellent points, and I would just echo, the importance of local races. There's nothing that really impacts your day-to-day life more than who your township trustee or your school board member or your member of city council is. If you've got a problem with the pothole in front of your house, the president of the United States is not fixing that pothole, right? It's the city council. So it's very important that we have people engaging up and down the ballot. And I would include issues in that, right? As a tax professional, property taxes are a big issue and top of mind for a lot of folks right now. But the vast majority of those taxes are voted levies. And so if you have an opinion on how your tax dollars should be used or whether a levy makes sense or not for your community, the best way to express that is at the ballot box. The other thing, I guess, that jumps out to my mind as a former election administrator, when you're running through the statistics about voter participation, those percentages are percentage turnout of registered voters, not percentage turnout of voter eligible population. And I think that's an important distinction because statistically, I think only about half of the people that are eligible to be registered in some parts of the world, parts of the state, are actually registered. Now, whether that's true in Cuyahoga County or not, I can't speak to. But that speaks to the importance of us going out and making sure that our neighbors, our friends, our family are registered to vote. And this week in particular, National Voter Registration Week was Tuesday. This is the moment when we're really focusing on this issue. The voter registration deadline is October 7th. So just making sure that we have everybody who is eligible registered to vote, and then turning out is critical to making sure the voice of the community is heard.
So you brought up statistics. 90% of the people that are over 18 in Cuyahoga County are already registered. So people call us all the time, will you register the people here, register there? And yeah, we do all that. But our big mission for all of us is to turn non-voters into voters. And what I tell people that are considering voting is, well, if you vote in every election, there's a public record of that. So if you go to apply for a job and you say you're civically minded, you're really into it, and then they look and they go, well, you've never voted or you hardly ever vote. Also, if you ever want to run for office, school board, mayor, whatever, your opponent's going to look at that and go, why should we elect this guy? He doesn't even participate. And another thing we need to remind people, especially the young ones, is voting is more than just marking a ballot. It symbolizes that you're ready to be part of society. You're ready to help make decisions that are going to impact your community and your neighbors. It gives you a right to mouth off because you're a proud voter. But it's a tough sell. I mean, you don't get instant gratification, and the young people tell us that's what they want. That's what they're used to. You might work real hard and your candidate loses and you're disappointed. You might work real hard and your candidate wins, but their performance is disappointing. So we spent a lot of time trying to get people to connect the dots, as was referenced. People can just feel like they're victims of programs that are being cut at the state and federal level, but the idea is to find candidates that align with your beliefs and vote for those people. Another barrier to voting is people say they don't know enough about the candidates and issues. Well, in this day of the internet, it's never been easier. You don't have to, during the print era, track down newspaper articles and things like that. You just go online and you can study any candidate. If you're not sure about the issues, there's League of Women Voters, and I think Ballotpedia. There are outlets that will give both sides of an argument. So the research is there. But for all of us, we have to create value in voting among the non-voters, because if we can create value, then they'll do it. And that's the key to all marketing. If people value something, no matter what it is, they'll take action or they'll spend money or something like that. So it's kind of a thought to ponder.
Thank you. You talked about the whole ballot and issues, and I know this year in the state of Ohio, we have a very high profile issue 1 again, but this year issue 1 is regarding gerrymandering. We can start with Essence. Can you enlighten us on the specifics of issue 1 and how it will affect us as citizens of the state of Ohio?
Absolutely. Let's go back in time to 2015 first. In 2015, Ohioans overwhelmingly voted in favor of fair maps. They did it again in 2018. The problem is the people in charge of drawing the maps had partisan bias. And so they drew those maps so that the people that they wanted to keep in office stayed in office. So why is issue 1 different this time? Because we're voting on gerrymandering again, right? Well, issue 1 is different because there's 4 main components that I want everyone to take away from them regarding issue 1. First, issue 1 is going to create a 15 citizen redistricting commission. It's going to be 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 5 independents. And these are going to be citizens, because issue 1 also bans current and former politicians, political party officials, and lobbyists from participating on this commission. So they're being removed from the process altogether. Third, issue 1 is going to make it unconstitutional for this new citizen-ran commission to draw biased and gerrymandered maps. And fourth, and probably one of the more important ones, is that issue 1 is going to make it required that this new commission operates in an open and transparent process. So there's going to be checks and balances. So that's why issue 1 is different. The main thing is politicians and lobbyists are no longer going to be in charge of drawing the maps. Any one of us could apply and be on this commission. And that's what makes it extremely important. And there's precedents for this. Other states have done it, and it's been extremely successful. So issue 1 is going to remove the bias from the process and make it fair for our citizens, so that our politicians are not picking their voters. The voters are picking the politicians.
Excellent information, thank you. I didn't realize actually that no former lobbyist or former politicians or elected officials, current politicians, because there always seems to be a way to undermine the intent of the voters, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to add, we saw this play out over and over and over again. The current redistricting commission would draw maps. They would send them to be approved. The Ohio
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court would kick them back and say, these are gerrymandered. Try again. And they're like, okay. And then they draw them again, and then they would send them. And it was this back and forth hamster wheel, because none of the maps that they sent were approved. Well, the Supreme Court is telling you these aren't approved, but you keep sending them back. And so what happened? We had to end up using the gerrymandered maps, because they just would not send over maps that were not biased towards a political party or a candidate. And gerrymandering works both ways. It's not just a problem on one side of the aisle. Gerrymandering can definitely happen for any candidate in any political party. So it's important that issue one is understood because the current ballot language is designed to confuse the voter. The current ballot language is designed to make issue one sound nefarious.
Thank you. I think this is great information. I think that's like I'm sure there are other issues on the ballot, but this is the highest level issue, the most impactful. When we talk about specific issues and what's on the ballot, I would like to ask each of you, what community efforts are you involved in to support voter education? We could start with Mike.
Oh, well, for one thing, we go where we're invited. So we're out and about in the community. Anything from a church picnic to a community festival to Head Start orientation, we're all over the place, and we got a staff of 6. So we do the best we can to go out and make presentations. And people say, come and do a registration table. And I always say, no, we do a lot more than registration. We want people to know that we show up with vote by mail ballot applications, with voter guides, with employment information, because we hire hundreds of temporary workers before a big election. We need to hire 4,000 poll workers. So we have a full array of voter education items that we take into the field. We also have very active social media. We're on all the popular platforms. And we have a very good website that a lot of thought's been put into how that works. And later on, I can go over a few instructions that will be helpful to anybody who's watching. So really, here's something that I thought was surprising. Even with the decline of the Daily Plain Dealer and the popularity of cable news, most people tell us that they still get their news and information about elections from the media. So they're watching 3, 5, 8, 19, and they're looking at cleveland.com or buying the newspaper. So that's a little encouraging that we have places that have journalistic credibility that people can still go to for research. So yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about voter education. And again, when we're working with voter advocates, and a lot of them are tuned into this too, it's not so much registration now, it's updating your registration because people move and forget to do that. And it's actually finding ways to get people to vote instead of just be registered.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And the Board of Elections does a tremendous job here of doing the outreach piece. So your team should be commended for everything that you do to try to get people engaged. Taking off my treasurer hat, what we do in our office to help people with the registration process and voter education. We're going to get into that in a minute, I know, but we are a registrar of voters under the National Registration Act, Voter Registration Act. So as part of your interaction with us as you're coming to pay your taxes, we ask if you're registered and if you'd like to be. So that's the main piece that we do professionally. Saying that though, personally and just as an engaged citizen, I like to make sure that I'm as informed as possible before I cast my ballot. And we are fortunate to have a lot of great resources available from a voter education standpoint. So I would just highlight the League of Women Voters publishes a voter guide every year that's very, very helpful. You can just Google these things, all the ones I'm about to mention, but that's a fantastic piece because they ask all the candidates the same questions. Candidates are given an opportunity to respond, and you can really get a sense first of all, if they're committed to engaging with the public, whether they respond or not, and then secondly, kind of where they're coming from. Over and above that, I think the judge races are the hardest ones to get a handle on most of the time. Often, especially down ballot, they're not listed with a partisan identifier. You might not know who they are or what they're about. There are resources like Judge for Yourself that are out there that you can find that are similar in that they ask the candidates questions. The bar associations publish ratings, and these are the people that are interacting with judges on a day in, day out basis. So the lawyers often have an insight into how folks are on the bench, or could be, because if you're running for judge, you're probably an attorney. So, those are really helpful resources too. And just to kind of circle back to the piece about media, I am 40 years old. I've got 2 kids who are coming up and going to be voters at some juncture. We all kind of live in our own little media silos increasingly these days, right? So it's great that people watch the news locally or get the Plain Dealer or go to cleveland.com. But a lot of folks are also getting their information from TikTok or Facebook or, wherever else they are digitally and in social media. And the danger there is that the algorithms on those sites, we know from research, direct you in a positive feedback loop. So if you're liking something, it's going to show you, more extreme versions of the thing you like until you're kind of in your own little silo. So I guess just the piece that I would counsel everybody to do, we talk about do your research. Taylor Swift said that right this week when she published her endorsement for president, and a lot of other people have. But just trying to break out of those silos. I know for my own personal consumption, I tend to read news sites that aren't in my partisan lane because I want to know kind of what the other viewpoint is. So that's just another thing I would encourage everyone to do. But whatever it is, I think the bottom line is engage, right? Make sure that you're informed and that you're not walking into the ballot box, without an idea of what you believe and what you want to vote for.
The Cleveland section for the National Council of Negro Women has been very busy and involved in voter engagement activities. Starting in March of this year, we started collecting signatures for the Citizens Not Politicians petition, which led to issue 1 being certified for the November ballot. In June, we hosted a voter education series for all of our members so that all of our members were aware of everything that they needed to know to be able to go out and start registering voters for our aggressive Get Out the Vote initiatives. From June of this year up until about October, because we are not stopping until the election is over, we will have participated in 10 voter registration drives, met with Congresswoman Shontel Brown, gone on 2 radio appearances with WOVU 95.5, participated in a voter education panel discussion. Let's see, what else? And participated in 1 candidate forum. So we are extremely busy and engaged in the community. We have a pulse on what our community members need and want because we're constantly out in the community working with students. We've been out at CSU for the last 8 weeks registering students to vote. And some of the things that we've gleaned from that experience has helped us craft our pitch a little better when we talk to the younger generation, because talking to them is quite different than talking to my grandmother about voting. You have to come at them from a different angle. So we've been fire tested there, and they've sharpened us quite a bit. So we really appreciate the experience that we've had at CSU.
Just to tell the audience, if you're just joining us, we are here today with Essence Doucette, Brad Cromas, and Mike West, and we are discussing voting and making sure we make our votes count. Just following up on something you touched on, Essence, how do we impress upon young people that their vote does matter? And this is for the entire panel.
This is a challenge because young people are 2 generations removed from the inescapable hardships our grandparents and great-grandparents had to deal with. They don't know what it's like to be denied basic civil liberties. And so to young people, I would approach them, as I alluded to earlier, a little bit different, and ask them to try to imagine a world where freedom of speech, freedom of religion, maybe the freedom to learn and read books doesn't exist. And ask them them to try hard to imagine what that would be like and how that would impact their day-to-day lives today. Because voting is your way of voicing your opinion about your future and the future of your children. It isn't a right that we should take for granted, because there are a lot of countries and a lot of places where you can't vote. You don't have a say in who represents you on city council or who represents you on the school board, who your teachers might be that are going to be teaching your children. All of these things are extremely important. So if you don't think voting is important for you, I employ you to think about your future children and how they may be impacted by your decision not to vote.
I just want to add to that. There's the truism that we are a reflection of the 3 to 5 people we most often interact with, right, or whatever that saying is. But I think the most important thing we can do for young people in our lives to show the value of voting is to make sure that we vote. So lead by example and talk about it, right? Like, I think politics, religion, personal finance, like, these are all things people like tend to avoid conversation with. But we need to make sure that we're being proactive and engaging the people in our lives, because that's how we make a difference and make sure that we are all engaging in our civic process more effectively. So all I would add to that.
I think a lot of it, in addition to what's been said here, is the candidates have a responsibility to talk about things young people care about. Years ago, I thought by now people would be talking a lot more about climate change and what's being done or not being done about that. Young people care about that. Young people are very concerned about student loans. If the candidates at all levels were talking about these things, what the jobs of the future are, and what the government is doing to encourage these industries that have a future, things like that. So I think it's a lot, maybe for us older folk, to get with the young people and say, well, find out their position on these issues. It's got to be on their website how they feel about these things. So, if we can get them to study the candidates a little bit more and figure out what they stand for, they might find things to align with, and that might create some value in voting there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit here. There's been a lot of focus on Secretary of State Frank LaRose purging inactive voters from the voter rolls. How can a voter find out if they've been removed, and if they have been removed, what they can do to re-register?
That is an easy one. I think if people take nothing away from this today, they should remember that if you go to our website, and we'll show this later, but and click on the voter tab, that tells you, that can lead you to everything you need to know with the online tools. The first thing you want to know is make sure you're registered to vote at your current address. And then you can find out where you vote. You can look at a sample ballot and things of that nature. There's been a lot of talk about purging over the last 16, almost 17 years I've been around. But the truth is that no matter which party the Secretary of State represents, if people don't vote for 6 years, they get removed. Dead people are removed because the Ohio Department of Health tells us who's died in Cuyahoga County. We find out who's been convicted of a felony and they're removed. But getting back on point, I think that the boards of elections, we try to move heaven and earth to get that list out there. So if there's people on there, that purge list, that don't want to be on there, they can go and re-register, and then they'll be fine. So I'm going to come back to this later, but a voting plan is really essential to make sure that you've checked all the boxes and you're prepared to vote. So it's easy to find out if you've been removed. Go to the website, type in your last name and your birthday, and it'll all be there.
The other thing about that is you can get removed for inactivity, right? So if you haven't voted or engaged in the process in some way during that period, you know, that is one of the things that leads to people being flagged for removal. So it's important that people stay active, I think, is the thing that I want to make sure that we get out there. And then the other thing is, when you're in the process, if you're flagged for confirmation, you have to make additional steps to, you know, make sure that prove who you are effectively. So, you know, it's in everyone's best interest for you to make sure that you're registered and staying active. And when in doubt, there is no penalty for re-registering, right? So if you aren't sure, you can always register again, and it'll just be a duplicate registration in the system. So that's I think an important take home for people to know too.
Well, and it can also be helpful to re-register. If you registered at 18 and now you're 65 and your signature looks a little different, you might want to re-register, because then they'll put a new image in our database. And just as a quick side note, your signature, your birth date, these are vital things when you register to vote. That's one of the main ways we still use to confirm you are who you say you are when you want to vote by mail, vote early, or vote on election day.
I know Laura touched on this earlier about the statistics that the majority of voters are voting every 4 years. So to our viewers haven't voted since 2020, I'm sure there's some changes that have taken place in the past 4 years. Can the panel highlight on any of those changes to the voting process that has occurred since 2020?
I'll just jump right in. Okay, the ID requirements have changed. So you want to go on the Board of Elections website, or if you got something like this in the mail over the last few days, if you didn't, you will get one. And that has the list of acceptable ID. So that's changed a lot. A few years ago, there was about 20 things you could use for ID. Bank statement, rent receipt, utility, legal papers, hunting license, fishing license. It was a huge list, but that has been narrowed down now. So be aware of that. And again, that's part of making your voting plan, knowing you have proper ID. Another thing is the deadlines for vote by mail have changed. It used to be you had until the Saturday before the election to get a vote by mail ballot application in. Now it's the Tuesday before the election. So you have less time to submit a vote by mail ballot application. Also, when you return that ballot, it used to be you could mail your ballot up to the day before the election. And if you did that, chances are it's not going to get there the next day. But it had 10 days for the mailman to get it from your local post office to the Board of Elections. Now it's 4 days instead of 10. So, you know, if you vote by mail, vote your ballot as quickly as you can, but don't rush, of course, and get it dropped off at the board or get it in the mail so you don't risk breaking any of the deadlines. There's a few others, but I think the most impactful is the ID requirements and the new deadlines for voting by mail. And also, if you haven't voted in 4 years and you want to vote early, that now is just like voting on election day. So you still need those same acceptable IDs to check in and get a ballot. And again, review these things on our website.
Great information. Actually, following up, Mike, can you explain the new rules regarding the absentee ballot drop-off boxes at the Board of Elections?
There has been talk about eliminating drop boxes. In the past, there's been talk about increasing the number. So for Cuyahoga County, we'd like to have one in North Olmsted and maybe one out in Euclid. Cover the 4 corners. But the law says one ballot box, and for all 88 counties, each get one. And it has to be at the board building. And if you have a family and everybody votes by mail, and you're going to bring the ballots and drop them off at the Board of Elections. If you have somebody else's ballot, even though it's your relative, you're supposed to come inside and let somebody know that you have these family ballots and you'll need to sign an affirmation that they are who they say they are and you are who you say you are. That's one of the new rules. We're still kind of digesting that one, but yeah, any new rules that come down, we implement them cheerfully at the board because that's our charge.
Thank you. Brad, we talked a little bit earlier about the county treasurer actually does play a role in the election process. Could you expand upon that?
Yeah, that's not a thing not a lot of people know. But as part of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, there are a number of entities that the federal government charged the states with designating as registrars of voters, which means we have the capacity to accept absentee ballot applications, voter registration forms, and help kind of direct people to the right pieces of the process. So that is the role that we play. We are a registrar of voters. We have set up stations in our cashiering space where people can get those forms. We have them in English and in Spanish. And so we have the capacity to route those to the Board of Elections. And that's kind of the main administrative role we play. The other places you can do that are libraries, schools, other government entities like the BMV or JFS if you're applying for benefits. So there are a lot of opportunities to register to vote. And we have an affirmative duty to make that available for folks. The thing I would add to that is it's probably easier to register to vote now than it ever has been because, I know a lot of voting rights changes recently have kind of been more restrictive. One way that they've gotten better and more accessible is through the online voter registration system. So if you were to Google Ohio online voter registration, Secretary of State's office has a website where you can put your information in and get registered to vote electronically, which is super, super helpful. So whatever folks do, we want to make sure that they're registered by the deadline, which is October 7th. I said that before, but that's
Yeah, you're correct.
Good.
And yeah, now's the time to start paying attention. And we talked about being removed from the rolls. Yeah, if you do nothing for 6 years, you're not going to be there anymore. People have fuzzy memories. They think they just voted a few years ago, but come to find out it's been 10. So it's always best to check, yeah.
Thank you. Now we come to the fun part of our discussion. Had a lot of fun already, but more fun. We're talking about dispelling myths, voter information that some people may not know about. I'm going to throw out a myth, and any of our panelists can respond to it. First myth, if you have a criminal conviction in Ohio, you cannot vote. True or false?
False.
There you go, enlightenment.
absolutely false. Right.
So,
Do you want to expound on that at all, or?
I can.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer to
can-
Mike on that one.
throw something. As long as you're not incarcerated, you can vote. So if you're out on probation or parole, after you're released, the first thing you want to do is head to the nearest library and register to vote. Because that'll get you right back on and you're in good shape. If people are in jail awaiting trial and they haven't been convicted of a felony, they can still vote. You can ask the jailer about it, and there are groups that actually arrange for people to vote when they're in jail. So that's something they can do, and this is a big problem. I ran into somebody who for 14 years thought he couldn't vote. I registered him right away, but these things are hard to break. I got a couple of myths to throw in when we're done with this list, too.
okay, myth number 2. If you have a disability, you cannot bring someone to help you vote. True or false?
Yes, you can. And one of the rules that has been changed recently is if you're disabled, you can have somebody who's a non-family member return your ballot. So yeah, there's lots of people that come to vote that are sight impaired, and we have machines in each polling location that help them with that. That goes all the way from vision problems to if you want to do sip and puff to vote, you can do these things. So yeah, any trusted friend can come and vote with you or your family. just a bad idea to have your boss come with you or your spouse, especially if you align on different political views. You, all our ballots are bilingual. All of our materials that we give out, voter guides to coloring books and everything in between, are bilingual, because the federal government tells us that there's more than 5% Spanish-speaking folks in our county, so we accommodate them with bilingual ballots. And people should know, voting age is 18. Everybody knows the Vietnam War got a lot of young people excited. They thought, if I can die for my country, I should be able to vote. Also, the drinking age was lowered in many states on that same premise, but things kind of got reversed as a practical matter. That one didn't work, but the voting at 18 stuck.
You know, I have a follow-up question. You know, we have the ballots in Spanish and whatnot. What if, for example, I speak Mandarin Chinese? What happens then? Can I have somebody accompany me to translate the ballot?
Yes, you could. And there's a lot of people. There's a woman named Lisa Wong, and her Asian organization goes to senior housing and all over the place to actually translate for people and help them vote. So there's help out there. But if you don't speak English or Spanish, yes, you can certainly come in. Now, if you vote early, we have an electronic translator that'll even do sign language if you want a sign language. It's like a magical screen. You turn it on, it'll translate languages, it'll do signing. It's really cool. But I want to touch on a myth before we move on, because this is really important. I've even had reporters write stories that say, well, they're counting the provisional ballots because there was an awfully close race out in North Olmsted. And I'm like, what? I'm on the phone. Why would we wait to count ballots? We count them all. Provisional, vote by mail, if you want to call them absentee. Every eligible one gets counted. And for provisionals, close to 100% of them are counted. So we don't know who started this rumor that we set aside a bunch of ballots and only count them if there's a close race. But anyway, so it's up to us to dispel that one. It keeps sticking around and popping up every election.
Yeah, can I add something to that one?
Sure.
Because the provisionals are a thing people really don't understand much about. And so a provisional ballot happens if there's some question as to your voter eligibility status, right? So you have to come in, say you've gotten married, your name changed, or you've moved, or something along those lines have happened. Those rules have gotten more restrictive. That's among the changes in the past several years that have come into play. So the best thing people can do is to stay out of that provisional ballot category, if at all possible, so that there is no question. You don't have to show up later and provide additional information. And the best way to stay out of that provisional ballot category is to make sure you're registered to vote at your current address by the deadline. So I just want to reiterate, this is why it's so important that registration happen and why that push is happening right now.
And if we had a perfect world, everybody would show up with a state ID that's valid or a driver's license that's valid that has their current address, and then you'll have a trouble-free voting experience.
In a perfect world. So we all know that we should plan out things we do in our lives. Best laid plans are great. So I want to ask the panelists to share with us how we as individuals can make an efficient voting plan for ourselves as we approach the November 5th election.
I can take this one first, if that's okay. I think every voting plan should contain at least three main components. First, it is your duty to research the candidates and the issues that are going to be on the ballot so that you are an informed voter. This is your time to interview those candidates to make sure they're suitable for the position that they're seeking. Second, once you've done your research, you need to check your voter registration status and make sure that you are registered to vote. And if you're not, register to vote. And then schedule the time to vote on your calendar and Make it a required task. I'm all about tasks. When I need to get something done, I'll assign it as a task and I'll check it off. Put it as a task on your calendar. So when that reminder comes up, it's time to go vote, no excuses, get it done. And then third, um, make sure that um, you bring someone with you to the ballot. It's important to drag people with you, even if it's just for them to witness the process because they're too young to vote. I had mentioned earlier that we spend a lot of time at Cleveland State Register and Students to Vote, but I was surprised that a lot of the students are 16, 15, 17 years old because they're taking college prep courses, so they're too young to vote. Those are the types of young folks that we need to bring with us so they can experience the voting process firsthand and familiarize them with what it's going to be like to vote when they become of age.
Yeah, I'm just going to put a plug in for early voting because if you're watching this, you are already engaged, right? So, like, I'm going to say now, if you're watching this, your plan should be to vote early and then to drag people with you, 100%.
Yeah, I think the elements of voting are simple. Get registered or update your registration, choose your voting method, and put it on the calendar for, this is the day I'm going to complete my ballot application, or this is the day we're all going to go down and vote early, or this is the time on election day that I'm going to block out to vote. For most people, that's going to be before work or after work. So, make that a priority. And of course, you have to check on your status and things like that. But those are the big decisions to start with.
And I would also add to make sure you know what's on the ballot for your local area. What's on the ballot in Cuyahoga County might be different in Portage County, might be different in Lake County. What's on the ballot in Cleveland Heights might be different than what's on the ballot in Strongsville. So make sure you know what's on your local ballot. And I think, Mike, we're going to put up the Board of Elections, a picture of the website, and there may be somewhere on there that you can find out what's on your ballot.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, if you click on the Voters tab, you're going to be able to check your registration, find your voting information by using your address. You can get a sample ballot to look at, and we've talked about how important that is. There's been a lot of talk about election integrity. We have a series of videos, information, and handouts on election integrity that are up there. Changes to Ohio voting laws, accessible voting services, ADA. And if you vote by mail, you can use a very useful feature, and that's track your ballot. So when you give us your application, once it's entered in the system and you look it up, you can see that we received your application. And then once you get your ballot, it'll show the date that your ballot was mailed to you. When you mail it back, it'll show that the ballot was received. So you can have peace of mind of tracking your ballot from start to finish. And it's also got information on voting early in person, voting on election day, learn how to vote by mail, and there's even a place where if you have questions about registration, you can click on there. So there's lots of fun places to go on our website to get information and statistics and things, but for most voters, pretty much everything you need to make your voting plan is on that one tab, and you'll see it on top where the blue stripe is.
Can you explain when you have to apply for absentee ballot? So when you're sending in your absentee ballot request, you have to then get a ballot. Can you explain that process?
Yes, it's a two-step process. And the first step is to obtain a vote by mail ballot application. You can call us on the phone and do that, or you can go online and use the tool that says, send me a ballot application. We like that one because you'll get a ballot application that's pre-filled out with a barcode. You just have to sign it and date it and then put it in the envelope that's included, put a stamp on it, and get it back to us as soon as you can. Or if you have a printer, you could print one off, or you can go to any library and get a ballot application, but you still have to mail it in or drop it off at the Board of Elections.
So we're going to put up some important dates on the screen as we're beginning to close out this discussion. General election is November 5th, 2024. The deadline to register to vote is October 7th, 2024. And the deadline to request an absentee ballot is October 29th, 2024. And early in-person voting starts on a beautiful day, October 8th, which is my birthday. But as we said, more information can be found on the Board of Elections website and calling 216-443-VOTE. So we here at the administration building today, we have our voting coordinator for the county, Yvonne Dortch, who has provided us with 2 tables. We're registering people to vote. We're giving out absentee ballots. We're giving out information. We've already registered someone this morning. Yay, yay, yay. And we're going to leave up the screen with the important dates. We want to very, 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 very thank our panelists for this wonderful wealth of knowledge that they've provided us today. Let's give them another round of applause. And we want to thank you all for joining us today. We have our audience participants as well as the people online. And we just want to say, when you leave here, remember, go vote. Thank you.